Hi, and welcome to episode 8 of Got a Story for You. I'm Phil Giunta, and as of this recording, I have as many subscribers as I do episodes, which ain't much to brag about, but if you did subscribe in the last couple of weeks since I started this, I appreciate your support for my fledgling YouTube channel. Thank you very much. As I mentioned in the last reading, the stories for the next 9 or 10 episodes will be from the Middle of Eternity speculative fiction series. These are anthologies comprised of science fiction, paranormal, and fantasy tales that began in 2014 with Book 1, Somewhere in the Middle of Eternity. And it is from this book that I will be reading this evening. The story is called Photos from the Attic. And to give you a quick summary of this tale, after inheriting her deceased uncle's home, Claudia Adamski finds a box of tattered old photos in the attic. As she and her daughter sort through the pictures, friends and family members begin dying tragically. When her mother is nearly killed in a fire, Claudia soon finds herself facing a vengeful spirit who won't stop until a family secret is revealed. I hope you enjoy tonight's ghost story, Photos from the Attic. I swear on my father's grave that everything you're about to read is true. It happened 3 years ago, around the holidays, bringing to a close the worst year of my life. I'd almost completely put it out of my mind until I came across my diary last week while moving to my new house. With Christmas almost upon us yet again, and since enough time has passed, I feel compelled to reveal what happened. After you read this account, feel free to tell me I'm full of crap, but I know what I experienced was real. It had to be. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, cardiac arrest had sent my Uncle Raleigh to his grave, along with nearly a lifetime of bitter grudges. He was my dad's younger brother, but you'd never have guessed it from their personalities. Whereas my dad had been gregarious and sociable, Raleigh had been a loner almost his entire life, especially after turning his back on almost everyone in the family over the last 15 years. Now Raleigh was 6 feet under, and to my surprise, he'd willed his house to me. Call us chickens, but neither my daughter nor I were keen on living in a place where someone had given up the ghost. I'll sell and take the money elsewhere, thank you very much. The truth be told, I was probably the only family member that Uncle Raleigh had never quarreled with. Of course, we hadn't seen each other since I was 21. I remember the incident well. A few days after I'd come home from college, my father died suddenly, and at least he'd lived long enough to see me graduate. Near the end of that summer, Uncle Raleigh had come to visit a few times. I remember that blistering August night when my mom and Uncle Raleigh ended up in an argument in our living room. From the top of the stairs, I'd caught the tail end of an explosive screaming match that ended when Mom threw him out of the house. I never saw my uncle again. Later, my mom explained that the argument had been about some matter concerning my dad's will. To this day, I'm not convinced of that. But at the time, I was too busy missing my dad to press her for details. With that history in mind, it hadn't entirely surprised me when my mother refused to help us clear out Raleigh's house before putting it up for sale. "Why don't you and Grace take care of it?" she had said. "It's not that much, and it'll be good therapy for you both. Get your mind off the divorce and give you two some quality time together." As if I didn't have enough to do as a single parent with a full-time job, my ex and I had just finalized the demise of our marriage 2 days after I turned 38, and exactly 1 month before Uncle Raleigh passed away. I was no longer Claudia Paulino. I was back to being old Claudia Adamski. Joy. So, on one of the coldest Black Fridays on record, I found myself crawling around a freezing attic, my nose, ears, and fingertips completely numb just after 20 minutes. I slid a tattered cardboard box across a filthy plywood floor toward the steps. It was the last thing to go, thank God. I wanted a shower and coffee in the worst way. "Mom? Up here." My 15-year-old going on 30 appeared at the bottom of the pull-down ladder. I still wasn't accustomed to her two-tone black and blonde hair, let alone exposed neck. Grace thought the short do made her look older and more sophisticated. As far as I was concerned, she was too young to worry about sophisticated. And as for looking older, I told her not to rush it. Someday, that's the last thing she'll want. Did you get everything out of the kitchen? I asked. It's all in the truck, Mom. What about the furniture? The movers will be here on Monday to take it all to storage. Your grandmother was right. Raleigh didn't have much, thankfully. It's a small house. Grace started up the steps, but stopped halfway into the attic. Cold up here. She nodded toward the cardboard box. What's in there? Probably more junk, I said. Can you take it down? But be careful, it's a little heavy. It might bottom out. Grace tilted the box as she carried it down, causing its contents to slide and shuffle. Sounds like a lot of paperwork. She carried it into the nearest bedroom and set it down atop the antique dresser. After wiping it off with a dust rag, she unfolded the flaps and peeked inside. What is it? I asked, relieved to be back in a room with heat. Old photos. No sooner had she spoken than the wall clock behind me stopped. Even weirder was the draft that swept into the room and ruffled the curtains. Grace and I looked at each other. You felt that? I asked. Yep. Well, maybe it came from the attic. Of course, I said that more for my own sake than Grace's. We stood statue still for another moment, anticipating something more, but all was quiet. Finally, Grace reached into the box and pulled out a handful of photographs. She set them on the dresser and began sifting through them. Some were stuck together face to face and had to be peeled apart. Careful, I said. They'd been up there for God knows how long, in extreme temperatures and humidity. Grace separated two photos and held them up for me to see. One was actually an old postcard from Assateague, Virginia, showing an aerial view of a calm blue ocean and crowded beach. The other was a Polaroid of a smiling little girl, 8 or 9 years old. She had long black hair and a one-piece powder blue dress. It took me a moment to recognize Margot. I snatched the photo from Grace's hand and sat on the edge of the bed. God, this has to be mid-80s. I haven't seen Margot since high school. She lived 2 houses up the street until her parents moved to God knows where after we graduated. This looks like it could have been a birthday party. Yep, that was our picnic table there in the background. Looks like there's a cake on it. I glanced at the cardboard box. Oy, sorting through all those will be like a drive down memory lane. I don't think that's a trip I want to take, but I bet your grandmother would love it. We can drop the box off at her place on the way home. Actually, these are kind of cool, Grace said. What if I salvaged what I could and put them into an album? I could give them to Grandmom as a Christmas gift. I thought that was a good idea. Money was a little tight, and the project might distract Grace from the divorce. As a teenager watching her family fracture and being helpless to stop it, Grace did an admirable job of hiding her pain most of the time. She got that strength from her dad, and I got it from her. I'd come to the conclusion a long time ago that grocery stores in the northern part of the country must love winter. At the mere mention of snow in the forecast, milk and bread become more valuable than gold, and checkout lines turn into the neighborhood hangout. And there I was, staring through the freezer door and debating the 4-pack of crab cakes when someone called my name. I'd heard it, but it didn't register until the voice was suddenly right behind me. Claudia Adamski? I turned to look at the woman, half expecting her to serve me a court summons from my ex-husband. Instead, she thrust out an empty hand. Tina Reese, from high school. I shook her hand out of reflex, and I think my eyes almost popped out of my head. It took a moment before I recognized 2-ton Tina, the heaviest girl in our class. I'd never called her that, of course, but I'd overheard other kids say it. There's no way that slur would apply today, though. Now she was more like Teaspoon Tina, slim and buff. The weight loss even made her seem taller than I remembered. I had to admit she was gorgeous. Damn it. Oh my God, you're so skinny, I blurted. I do that a lot. Blurting. I'm blonde. It happens. I mean, you look great. Tina laughed. Well, it took a lot of work. So, how are you? Getting ready for Christmas? I nodded, emphatically. It seems I always do that before I tell someone that everything's wonderful when I'm not really feeling it. It's like I'm trying to convince myself, too. I probably look like a bobblehead. I'm doing great. Well, now I am. Had a rough patch earlier this year. Got divorced. Tina nodded solemnly. Not like a bobblehead at all. Sorry to hear that. Do you have any kids? Well, my daughter Grace is 15, doing very well in school, thankfully. She's taking martial arts, piano lessons, archery. I get exhausted just talking about it. We have two boys, 13 and 10. Between the two of them, we have almost every sport covered, plus guitar and drum lessons. It's nonstop. Didn't life seem simpler when we were kids? You ain't kidding. Do you keep in touch with anyone from the old days? I don't know why I asked. I'm the least nostalgic person on the planet. But it was the only common ground between us. Oh, a few here and there. Do you remember Margot Hanson? Absolutely. Last week I came across a photo of her when she was a little kid from the old neighborhood. She's dead. I had to consciously close my gaping mouth. An awkward moment of silence passed before Tina spoke again. Her family moved to Florida after she graduated high school, and Margot still lived there. Married into money, had 3 kids, big house, private beach, all that. Went swimming 2 days ago and apparently went out too far. They say she had a seizure before she drowned. Seizure? Drowned? Margot had epilepsy. I never knew that. Neither did Margot until she was 16. And even then, she didn't tell anyone. Kept it under control with meds. Well, that's unbelievable. We chatted for another minute before Tina wrote her email address on the back of my grocery list. We wished each other a Merry Christmas before parting ways. I turned back to the freezer and the crab cakes, realizing that I'd lost my appetite for seafood. The snow still hadn't started yet by the time we finished dinner. Grace went off to her room to finish her homework, filled with the hope that there would be no school the next day. I didn't say a word about Margot, but her photo was still on the coffee table, on top of a pile that Grace had pulled from the box yesterday. I said I'm not the nostalgic type, but I was curious, so I scooped up a small stack of pictures, dropped onto the sofa, and started flipping through them. There was a mix of different sizes, but most were 4x6 or Polaroids. Some were familiar, though it had been years since I'd seen them. It's always interesting to see your parents when they were your age or younger. They'd actually had a life before I was born. Vacation pictures, their first house, first car, the usual stuff. There was one picture of my parents and Uncle Raleigh at the log cabin that my Aunt Josephine used to own. She's my mom's sister and still with us, God bless her, but she sold the cabin about a year after her second husband died in 1982. At the bottom of the stack, I found 2 pictures stuck together like the ones with Margot on the beach. I managed to peel them apart without tearing them, although slivers from each image left their mark on the other. Still, Uncle Raleigh's sky blue Mustang brought back memories. I don't remember the car's exact year, but it was early 70s with a white interior. I remember riding in it a few times when I was a kid. The other photo was a Polaroid of Aunt Josephine dining at a fancy restaurant. I couldn't tell what the occasion was, but there were other people in the background that I didn't recognize. Judging by the clothes and hair and age of the photo, it was clearly the 60s. The image was faded and the photo was frayed around the edges. Taking over the project, I nearly jumped out of my skin when Grace appeared and picked up another stack of photos. I guess I was too focused on, well, nostalgia. Finish your homework? She rolled her eyes and gave me an exasperated yes. Ah, teenagers. Dad texted me he wants me to help him pick out a Christmas tree this weekend. Real or fake? Fake. How appropriate. I kept my mouth shut and went into bobblehead mode again. He wants a white tree with blue lights. Grace sifted through her handful of photos. She came across 2 more that were stuck together and started working on them. He asked me to help put it together. Well, that'll be nice, and I'm glad he wants to spend some quality time with you. Grace successfully separated the photos. She glanced at them both before handing one to me. Is that Dominic? I took it and turned it right side up. Yep. It was my cousin at his college graduation, complete with cap and gown. Dominic had been 2 years ahead of me at Lehigh University and had graduated summa cum laude. At the time, I hated him for it. Aunt Josephine spared no opportunity to inform the family of her son's latest achievements, like making the dean's list again, or earning yet another award, or generally walking on water. Okay, maybe Dominic hadn't done that last one, but you get the idea. He'd moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma 3 years ago after accepting a promotion to VP of Operations at whatever Fortune 500 company he worked for. Last I'd heard, he was dating some rich, high-powered attorney who had started her own firm. What's that other photo that was stuck to this one? Grace held it up. A couple of antique airplanes. 2 single-pilot prop planes, to be exact, and straight out of the 1930s. Sunlight gleamed off perfectly polished silver wings. Both of them were side by side on a massive concrete pad. Must have been a museum, or an air show. By then it was nearly 9:30 and I was fading fast. I pushed aside the curtains behind the sofa and took a quick peek outside. Sure enough, it had started to snow. You might just get your wish after all, Grace. Oh, it'd be nice to sleep in. And then you can help me clear the snow at Uncle Wally's house. I think I'd rather be in school. I'm sorry, but that place creeps me out. I mean, he died in the living room. People die in their homes every day. It isn't like we're going to live there. It's probably haunted. Only if you imagined it to be. I didn't imagine that draft we felt in the bedroom when we opened the box of photos. I didn't imagine all the clocks in the house stopping all at once. I had to admit, I had no answer for that. Grace was right. It wasn't only the clock in the bedroom that had stopped when we opened the box. Afterward, as we checked the house one last time before leaving, we noticed that every clock had stopped. Great. Now my imagination was starting to run with the idea. Just what I needed before going to bed. With Christmas just 2 weeks away, death had struck our family again. I sat at my mom's dining room table, picking at the breading on cold chicken fingers, as the sheer, cruel absurdity of it ran through my head. Across the room, Aunt Josephine and Dominic stared at me, waving, smiling, hugging. A combined 112 years of living had been reduced to a collage of photos taped to poster boards. Grace had volunteered to create them for the double funeral, using the photos from Uncle Wally's attic. Aunt Josephine had been killed by a drunk driver while leaving the post office in the middle of the afternoon. The little prick had tried to make a turn on the cross street, but had cut to the right too soon, plowing into Aunt Josephine and crushing her between his car and a brick wall. To take the pressure off of Mom, I'd volunteered to call Dominic. I remember the quivering in my chest as I dialed his number. It had occurred to me that I'd never broken that kind of news to anyone before. To be honest, I don't even remember the conversation now. Dominic had jumped on a plane the next morning, but he never made it. His connecting flight from Tulsa to Dallas-Fort Worth had crashed somewhere outside of Wewoka, Oklahoma. Dominic's remains had been cremated and buried in an urn with Aunt Josephine. Mom was devastated. We all were, of course, but she was the oldest of 3 sisters, and now the last. The youngest, Aunt Wendy, had lost her battle with cancer over a decade ago. As I continued staring at the poster boards, I heard my mom's voice in the living room. Her tone was hushed and detached as she chatted with Grace and a few of my cousins. She was doing an admirable job of holding herself together, which only meant the dam would burst once everyone had gone. I'd inherited that trait from her, but Grace is different. She'd been my rock since her father and I separated, and now she was doing the same for her grandmother. Hard to believe she's my kid. Your daughter reminds me of Dominic. The silky drawl snapped me back to attention, and I realized that I'd been focused on the photos to the exclusion of anything else around me. I'm not sure why I couldn't look away. Something was troubling me, beyond the obvious. I followed it for later and glanced up to see Elena taking a seat to my left. Dominic's girlfriend had flown in 2 days ago. She was quite the exotic beauty, with narrow hazel eyes and luxurious brown hair that framed high cheekbones and a flawless olive complexion. Her waist was so damn narrow that I wanted to offer her my cold chicken fingers. But above the waist, she was rather well endowed. I wondered if they were real. Really? I gave up on the chicken and wiped my fingers on a napkin. How so? I hadn't seen him in years, just heard about him from time to time. Well, Dominic never let circumstances get the best of him. He had broad shoulders, literally and figuratively. A lot of people leaned on him, both professionally and personally, but his attitude never faltered, even when he was stressed out. He was always there when needed. I smiled despite myself. That was my grace to a T. Elena sat back in her chair and turned her gaze to the poster boards. I never thought I'd meet his family under these circumstances. How long were you two dating? About 3 years. We talked about marriage. Elena wiped her eyes. But I wasn't ready for that yet. I didn't know what to say, so I changed the subject slightly, and because I was curious. How did you two meet? Elena let out a short laugh. Through mutual friends, although we recognized each other the minute they introduced us. Dominic and I had crossed paths several times before that during evening runs at La Fortune Park. She gave a weak smile. Apparently, he noticed me as much as I did him. I didn't know he was a runner. Elena nodded. Dominic loved exercise. He was the picture of health. And that's when I realized exactly what was bothering me. And we'll find out in episode 9. Thanks, and catch you next time.